Hello, everybody, and welcome to the For the Love of Language podcast. I'm EJ.
And I'm Stacy. Welcome back, everybody. We took a little break for the holidays. I hope you all had a great end of the year, or if it wasn't a great end of the year, I hope you are feeling better now. I know I am.
Right?
How about you,
Hope,
EJ? You feeling better
hopefully
now?
things are going well. I'm feeling great. I'm feeling fantastic.
Fuck
So,
yeah, dude. Let's go.
yeah. So today we're going to talk about language and dementia, specifically on how or if bilingualism can protect against dementia.
Yes. EJ found this really fantastic article that we've read through, and it spurred some ideas and some points of discussion
Yeah.
about like neuroplasticity and neurolinguistics and how language can kind of impact your memory and stuff. So we're just gonna have a fun little chit chat about it today.
And for reference, the article that we're looking at is called Does Bilingualism Protect Against Dementia? A Meta-Analysis. This was published in 2020 by Anderson, Harlewicz, and Grundy. So you can find it online. I'll post a link in the comments. But a good portion of what we're going to talk about is going to be based on that and also just based on our linguistics experience.
Yeah. So, for those who are curious or aren't super like, if you don't read a whole lot of like scientific articles, which there are a lot, I don't expect anybody to just sit down and read a scientific article. But for those who maybe don't know, a meta-analysis is taking a bunch of other people's work and then like putting it together to draw some bigger conclusions based on the work a lot of people have done and testing to see how viable it is, right? So in this case, they took a bunch of different studies from all over the place. They're smashing them together and seeing what is the bigger picture based on some of these little bits and pieces that we've seen. So meta-analyses can
Absolutely.
be really helpful when making big, broad, generalized statements.
Right. So when we're looking at this article, its main claim ends up being that being bilingual can delay the onset of symptoms of Alzheimer's and dementia. So basically, you might still end up getting Alzheimer's or dementia if you were going to in life, but it might be 5 years later that you notice the symptoms than you otherwise would have if you weren't bilingual. So this is really interesting because there's a big question of why and how
Mm-hmm.
in my mind.
Yeah.
So, and there's some claims about how learning a language or knowing a second language means that you're just actively using more pathways in your brain.
Yes.
Like you're actively using a greater, not maybe cognitive load, but like you're actively processing things more with your brain, and just like
Mm-hmm.
that practice and having more pathways can make it so that these neurological diseases display a little bit later.
Yeah. So in kind of conjunction with that, before we kind of jump super into it, I wanted to talk a little bit about how they're defining bilingualism, because there are so many misconceptions even within the world of linguistics about what makes a bilingual. Is there like a perfect 50-50 bilingual? Like what are some of the qualities of bilingualism? And they don't go into it a whole lot here, but a couple of the studies that they reference as being part of the meta studies were specifically looking at people who, at least from a very young age, showed bilingualism and kind of grew up with bilingualism. But after we're kind of done talking about the main topic, we can probably circle back to what if you're in like your 50s and 60s and you want to learn a language? Would that help you delay stuff as well? So I think that's something to circle back to once we kind of hit some of the main points.
Absolutely. Like, is there an actionable course of action given this research?
Yes, yes.
Perfect.
Yeah. So, yeah, let's go back to the why that this happens. EJ, you mentioned that that a lot of it has to do with your cognitive load and this is something that they mention in there too of like being able to kind of bounce back and forth between the languages. That's something that's kind of prioritized in this study is like these aren't passive bilinguals. These are people who who are actively maintaining both of these languages and kind of bounce back and forth between them, which
Right.
of anyone who knows another language or is bilingual knows that it takes a lot out of you. It takes a lot out of you. Like it, even if you are proficient in both, there is like a mental, like a cognitive switch that kind of has to happen. If you're even if you're blending the two or bouncing from one to another, like it takes a little bit more brain power than it would for a monolingual who doesn't have to actively switch between two different modes in their brain.
Yeah, and I think this is reflected also in, other research that we've noticed or noted in other episodes where it's shown that like kids learning multiple languages, like growing up bilingual, sometimes at first when they enter kindergarten, it seems like they're behind other kids because, they say this thing in one language and this thing in another language.
Mm-hmm.
But then a few years later, they're actually statistically exceeding their peers across the board, not just with language. And so I think there's kind of the same argument there of like you're using your brain more, you're practicing these difficult, switches more frequently than someone who just learns a single language.
Yeah. And like you were saying, this skill transfers to other areas as well. Like I've had students who are bilingual come up and say like, "Hey, like I'm able to think about this concept slightly differently in like this language or I'm able to like make different connections because they can kind of relate connections like even like mathematical stuff back to their experiences with their languages and because they have more reference points they're able to kind of like use those reference points in different ways.
Right. And I think part of this also is related to, learning a language isn't just learning this word equals this word equals this word, and like a pure memory game. Learning a language has to be a fully different way of thinking because you're changing the order of the words. There's different
Yeah.
culturally acceptable ways to phrase things. And
Yeah.
so having to think around all of that every time that you switch between languages and having to learn all of that means that there's like additional stuff going on that you're
Yeah,
constantly,
it's
manipulating.
it's a form of creativity is what it is. And people don't think of it that way. People are like, "Oh, language is, that's not like an inherently creative thing." But I've talked about this a bunch of times, but language is an inherently creative process. And when you're working between languages, it's even more so. Like I think I might have told this story before, but I fucking love it. My French teacher once told me that she had a student who couldn't think of the French word for skull, like the main bone inside of your head. And so the way that the student said it was a head without meat, which is like, you know, yeah, that makes sense. Whatever a head is, and then you subtract the meat, you get the skull, right?
Logical.
So that's a creative way to solve a problem. And people who are bouncing between languages, this happens quite a bit. Like this is it engages a creative thinking process.
Absolutely. What Stacey just said, as far as like referring to the skull that way, is an example of strategic competency in
Yes.
language, which is like pragmatics is probably my favorite part of linguistics. And I love that, like talking around things and figuring out a way to communicate, even if you don't have the perfect words or the perfect way to state things. That's a huge part of language. So I absolutely love that. I do want to call out as well when we're saying this about language, like making you use your brain more and like all of
Mm-hmm.
these amazing things. We're not saying that it's only language that can do this.
Yes.
And even
Yeah.
in the study itself, let me just like read this brief quote directly from it. It says, we noted earlier that one should not expect bilingualism to prevent or reverse Alzheimer's pathology. Rather, bilingualism, like most other forms of cognitive reserve, including higher education and demanding occupation, likely strengthens alternative functional circuits, which may be recruited to allow individuals with increasing amounts of Alzheimer's pathology to present as cognitively normal. And they also cite a couple studies by
Yeah.
Stern for that
So
statement.
to rephrase what EJ just read, there's a bunch of different things out there that can help you and help delay some of these symptoms. It's not just language. If you have a difficult job that requires problem solving, if you're like an academic and you use problem solving, any type of like problem solving skill or creative endeavor that gets your brain working and moving those pathways, kind of like how they say your dog needs enrichment. And so you can give your dog like these like fancy puzzle toys or whatever, and it like works their brain. Like people can do the same thing. We can do the same thing. And it turns out it's helpful. It's helpful to get a little bits of enrichment, you know?
Absolutely. Like you need to actively take some control over your life and not just like settle into the same mundane pattern day after day. Like you need to challenge yourself with new things, push your limits, practice using your brain. And I think that goes back to Stacy's question. Maybe we should touch back on it now of like, does it matter when you become bilingual? Like, do you have to grow up bilingual, or does learning a language later in life or even in your old age have the potential to help with this? I would argue that it's going to help regardless. Like when I look at
Yes.
studies like this, the crux of it for me is like you need to be trying, striving, growing, looking for ways to expand your knowledge in some way, whether that's with language or with, other types of endeavors, puzzles, sports, like whatever it is, like find something that you're passionate about to expand your mind, and it's not going to hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
The impact will probably be different. There might be research on like how like the onset of you trying to do this impacts it. It's such a broad array of possibilities of and factors that would have to go into it. But I would say if you haven't tried anything new and like you're in your 80s or even 90s, it's not too late to start and learn something about a new language. Like it's definitely not going to hurt you and it might help.
Yeah, so EJ, like you're saying, it's a great way to, it doesn't matter how old you are. Starting something new can be a great way to reactivate a lot of those neural pathways in your brain. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, but shouldn't you learn a language when you're a baby or when you're like a teenager?" And the answer is no, you can learn a language at any time and become proficient. Language learning is just like any other skill. You can learn the piano if you're like 80 or 90. Your fingers might not be able to reach as far if you're a little arthritic, but like you can still do a lot of stuff, you know? So, like, you should never limit what you want to do based on your age, especially if it's like a mental activity. Like, by all, like you're gonna do great no matter how old you are.
Right. And even like the pursuit itself should bring you joy and fulfillment. Like it's all a question of what you're motivated to do and what you want to
Yeah.
put the time into.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're on the older side and learning a language is just like not the vibe, you don't have to learn a language. Like I said, you can pick up a piano, you can start doing puzzling, like anything to just work your brain a little bit more is really good for, just maintaining a healthy memory.
Right. And I think there's a point here I want to touch on as well. Like, at a certain point, it can be really hard, whether it's you going through something like dementia or Alzheimer's, or whether you're like a caregiver or a friend for someone like that. Like, there's a lot of emotion and difficulty in it. And
Yeah.
like, we're also not saying like, you're just going to fix this because that's
Yes. Yeah.
not realistic either.
Mm-mm.
Um, but it's more of a question of, what are the things that you can do in life that will benefit you?
Yeah. It's preventative.
Exactly. And that also doesn't mean that it's going to totally prevent it. Like even in this
Exactly. Right.
study, it says it delays the onset, but it had less of an impact in like whether or not people would actually get it or not. So I think there's also a degree of just acceptance of,
Hmm.
what life has for you, for others, and, don't use these discussions to hide or be in denial of that kind of thing, but
Yeah.
take them for what they are.
Yeah, it's true. Even if you brush your teeth and floss every day, you could still get a cavity. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be brushing and flossing. It's like there are a bunch of elements that play into people's health. Like I personally have had a lot of health issues over the past couple of years, and it's one of those things where it's like, I can, if I work really hard, I can fix it. And sometimes that's just not how life works, especially with health. Sometimes your body just happens and things just happen, and there's not much you can do but try your best to manage what's there. Didn't mean to go off about health, but that's just like a general thing. Like health is a really difficult subject, and it's a very emotional thing, and there's a lot of like a lot. I know for me there's like a lot of guilt and shame of like, oh, if I had just done this, then it wouldn't have happened, that I wouldn't have gotten sick. And there might be some people out there who are like, oh, if I had just learned 3 languages before I turned 50, then maybe. And it's like, no, no, no. Like sometimes bodies happen and sick happens.
Right.
It's just part of life.
Exactly. So just look at where you're at and what action you do want to take that makes the most sense for you.
Yeah, yeah. But I think it is a hopeful study, right? It is really cool to see what our brains are capable of when you work them, and what can happen if you are stimulating your brain. Like a delay in an onset of a disease is pretty cool. That's like
Absolutely.
nothing to scoff at.
Yeah. So I don't think I have anything else to really add to this. Do you, Stacy?
I don't think so either. I mean, other than just like neuroplasticity is so cool, man. Like, it's such a cool idea of like, yo, if you are creative and if you problem solve, then your brain gets like more complex. That's just a cool idea, and I really
It
like it.
is.
Our brains are really cool.
And a lot of people have in the past set these limits of like, after this age, you can't learn a language, or after this age, you can't learn XYZ. But more and more research has found those limits that people state are entirely arbitrary.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
there might be some personal restrictions, absolutely, but like, your brain is capable of learning and growing like far, far, far into your life. And that,
Yeah.
I'm just rephrasing what Stacy said, but that is amazing.
Yeah, yeah. It like anyone who says otherwise says that you can't learn something new. An old dog can't learn new tricks. That's all coming from places of like bias or power structures or something. It's something else. It's not the actual
Yeah.
scientific facts that we're seeing.
And maybe it does come from experience, but maybe there's still ways that, that individual or that situation could go differently by
Yeah.
trying differently.
Yeah. Everybody has skills and talents in different areas. And just because like language learning isn't for you, doesn't mean it might not work for somebody else, and vice versa. There's so many different ways to engage your brain, and you just kind of have to find what makes your brain produce the happy juices, because that's what'll do stuff.
On that note, thank you for listening to For the Love of Language. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to us on Instagram, and we'd love to hear from you. Give us a rating wherever you're listening, and we'll see you next time.
Keep those brain juices flowing.